2L year was my worst year in law school. Let's talk about it. My name's Kimber Marie, your lawyer friend who is obsessed with all things intellectual property, and these videos on my YouTube channel are for memorializing my time in law school, which ended last December. And I thought it would be nice to just make all these videos where I'm giving the advice while these memories are still fresh in my mind, in the hopes that they can help future law students or current law students who watch them. In today's video, I wanted to talk about my 2L year, the courses I took, the extracurriculars I was involved in, and the obstacles I faced, and either what I did to overcome those obstacles or what I wish I did. So to start, if I were to sum up 2L year in just like one or two words, I would say it was a mental battle. And the reason I say that is because my mental health tanked during 2L year. I'm not saying that to fearmonger anyone. That may not be the case for you. I hope it's not the case for you. I think there are definitely ways to prevent that. I know that a lot of my classmates, the ones that I was close to, and then just from talking with them since then, there are a lot of people who experience the 2L slump, is what it's called. And so I will get more in depth on that. But before we do that, I just wanted to give an outline as to the classes that I took and the extracurriculars that I was involved in. We'll go with classes. Again, I went to Elon University School of Law. It's a trimester-based system. So my fall term, I took business associations. I was actually wrong in my last video. I took evidence during my spring term of my 1L year, and I took business associations during my fall term of my 2L year. And then I also took professional responsibility and what else? Intellectual property, constitutional law, part 1, because my school splits it into two separate classes. So that was fall. Winter was con law 2, criminal procedure and immigration law. So that was a fairly light semester. It feels weird saying trimester because it sounds like we were pregnant. For spring, I was on my residency, which is required for all 2L students at Elon. I'm fairly certain that other schools have programs similar to this, although I'm not necessarily sure if every school requires it. But essentially the 2L class is split into two. Some people are on residency, which is essentially a 10-week working for experience opportunity for law students. Some did that during their winter semester, others did it during their spring semester. So for me, it was spring, and I was at Elon's Small Business and Entrepreneurship Clinic, which is essentially where we helped local entrepreneurs with business formation, a lot of trademark research. There were one or two copyright questions, although it was more trademarks that came through, and then reviewing contracts, doing client interviewing and intakes. That was the bulk of what we did there. On top of the residency, I did have a few classes, so it was somewhat of a heavy load, I guess. Two of them were online, though they weren't that in-depth. It was law office technology, which was helpful, but again, it was a fairly breezy class, as breezy as a class can be in law school. I also took business drafting, which I enjoyed because we had an adjunct professor, so her day-to-day, she was actually doing business drafting in her real life job. So I really appreciated having that experience, learning from someone where they were actually doing what we were learning how to do. Extracurriculars, the first one that comes to mind was law review. I wrote on to law review. I started off as a staff writer, as most people, and then our elections took place in November, and I was voted into the chief symposium editor position, which basically I was just leading the team that planned our annual symposium. A symposium is usually where, in this case, a law school plans almost like a conference. It's usually a day-long conference where you have speakers and panelists to come and talk about their most recent legal research, or if it's not necessarily about an article that they've written, it's about a pertinent topic. It's, again, day-long. They come and talk, and it's a great opportunity to give CLE credit to attorneys in the area as well as for law students to network. So That was my position in law review. I'll make a video getting more in depth about law review. Just for purposes here, my school, and I think most schools, offer credit for law review. So for us, it was 1 credit per trimester. Outside of that, I also helped to restart a podcast for the First Generation Law Student Society at our school. I did that with 2 other classmates. That started in like fall of 2L. I also was trying to freelance articles in areas I was interested in, which I was able to do. I did an article on the Warhol Goldsmith case before the Supreme Court issued their opinion on that for our NC Bar blog. And then I also freelanced an article about Chaco Culture National Historic Park for the Center for Art Law. So I'm very proud of those because those were very specific to areas I'm interested in. Also during 2L fall, I took the MPRE. I just wanted to go ahead and get that over with, and I would advise you to also do the same. Like if you're able to just go ahead and take it, do it, check it off your list. The Multi-State Professional Responsibility Exam, which is what that stands for, it's required, I believe, nationwide. And so the professional responsibility class I was taking was to prep us for the MPRE, and I just wanted to go ahead and take it. Outside of that, this is not an extracurricular, but I'm really glad that I did this. I actually volunteered for a few days at the Sundance Film Festival out in Utah. It was me and another classmate. We flew out there. It was a very eye-opening experience getting to be a volunteer at one of like the big American film festivals, and I loved it. I want to go back. It was interesting to see the dynamics between the film reviewers and like the press, as well as the people who were there just out of love for film. Perhaps it's a little bit random to do that during law school. I'm sure that there are some people who were just like, why would you do that during law school? But again, if you've watched my other video for 1L year, you'll know that if you're managing your time properly, doing a 2-3 day trip to go and volunteer somewhere or do something that actually applies to the areas you're interested in, which this was for me since I'm interested in intellectual property, art law, entertainment law, it made sense to go and do something like this, and I didn't feel guilty for it. Plus, I was managing my time as well as I could, so I recommend it. I recommend it for people who are good at managing their time to go and plan fun events like that can also be leveraged as opportunities for career networking or just getting an inside look at the industry you want to break into. The saying for 2L year is that they work you to death, and the reason that feels true for so many students is because you're starting to take on leadership positions, you might be volunteering more, you have these extracurriculars, plus you're starting to sign up for classes that you're interested in, that you're not just being required for, plus your regular class load. You may be doing research assistant positions or teaching assistant positions, which I also did that. I was a teaching assistant for torts that fall of my 2L year, and then signed on to be a research assistant that following spring for my contracts and intellectual property professor, which if you have the opportunity to do either of those things, highly recommend it. It's fun in its own way to be able to give back to other students or to help a professor with their research. It's a great learning opportunity. That being said, it can also add a lot onto your plate. So that will lead me into my first obstacle that I faced that I think I handled relatively well. So I'm just going to say that obstacle and then I'll explain more. So that obstacle is spreading myself too thin. And I say that I handled it relatively well because I didn't try to be on every single club. I didn't try to be on moot court, mock trial, and law review. I know students who have done it and they've done well at it. If that's you, that's great. If that's not you, please don't guilt yourself, okay? It is okay to pick one, maybe one from law review, mock trial, moot court, if you're able to get on one of those things, and then supplement that with a club or a volunteering opportunity that's regular. That is a lot. my advice is just don't spread yourself too thin. It's very easy to just say, yes, that'll look good on my resume, or yes, I should do that because I'm interested in estate law or family law, whatever it may be. It's so easy to gaslight yourself into thinking that you can do it all and do it all perfectly. The reality is that you can't. I couldn't, no one can. It's okay to say, I am going to devote my time and attention to these areas, and that's it. Everything else is going to be a no until I'm able to handle more. Second, you start to feel stretched too thin, or you're starting to maybe get behind on readings or assignments or just promises that you've made to people, that is a yellow flag that you might need to reel it in a little bit. Second big obstacle was mental health. And I want to preface this conversation with mental health is something, specifically anxiety and potentially OCD, which I don't have an issue saying it. I say potentially OCD because while it was my therapist who mentioned this diagnosis to me, it wasn't an official diagnosis. And I don't just want to say something without qualifying like what I actually mean. That being said, every book that I've read about OCD, it's like reading a book about myself and talking it over with my therapist. It makes a lot of sense. But I share all of this because these are things that I've been dealing with since middle school. Going into law school, for me, it exacerbated, I guess, the worst aspects of my anxiety and OCD over time. I think with 1L year, I was able to go in and just like white knuckle it and get through. But then by 2L year, the stress was really wearing on me and was starting to get burnt out a little bit, even though I was managing my time pretty well. And that fall, it started to get heavier, if that makes sense. What did that look like for me? I was procrastinating a little bit more than I usually did, just putting off assignments, especially since I had, I guess, gained confidence in my ability to prepare for classes. So there was a little bit more procrastination. I started crying on the way to classes. I literally had to drag myself to school to get out of bed. I just had no interest in doing all the things that I usually do, and those are key signs of depression, whether it's situational or chronic for you. And again, everyone looks different. Just because I experienced it one way doesn't necessarily mean that it will be the same for you. So yeah, the way that I tried to overcome that was I decided February of 2023, so spring of 2L year, I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna invest in meeting with a personal trainer for 3 to 4 sessions so I can learn how to weightlift again. I hadn't weightlifted since volleyball in high school, and then it was like more for conditioning purposes. It wasn't like a legit weightlifting program. And it's something I've always wanted to learn how to do. I went to a local gym, found a trainer that I felt was reasonably priced, that I could afford living on loans. And I don't regret it. To this day, that was the best investment I made in my 2.5 to 3 years of being in law school and studying for the bar. Because that weight program, even though all 4 days came out to probably like maybe $100 or $200, I was given a weight program that I still use now 2 years later, although I haven't been to the gym in a few months, but we'll talk about that another time. But when I go back to the gym, I'm still using that same program. I recommend not being afraid to invest in your health within reason. You don't want to go out of budget as much as possible, but if it's something that will help you mentally, emotionally, and physically, to me, it's worth the cost usually. That being said, I started the weightlifting. I did notice improvement in mental clarity, energy, sleep, but the panic attacks were getting worse. Every single morning that I drove to residency, I cried on my way there. I remember one morning calling my dad and just panicking. Like I just needed someone to talk to. And yeah, and yeah. I remember my dad being like, what's wrong? Like, what's happening? And I'm like, I don't know. If I knew, I would fix it. I wouldn't be calling. That was multiple times a week. It was bad. The straw that broke the camel's back was one day, this was probably our 2nd or 3rd week into residency. We were doing a client interview And I started to have a panic attack, and I was like, I can't leave right now. The client is literally on, it was via Zoom. So me, two other classmates, and the professor were all in one room together. And then the client we were interviewing for intake purposes was up on the screen for via Zoom. I was like, I know that they can't see me fidgeting right now, but I know my classmates next to me definitely can. And I was just sweating, fidgeting like crazy. I wanted to cry. I didn't feel like talking. Like, it was just absolutely horrible. I had done so good at masking my anxiety symptoms up until that point. Like, usually I would just excuse myself, go to the bathroom, take a little walk down the hallway, deep breathe, whatever I needed to do. And that just didn't happen. So the second that client interview ended, like the second the Zoom ended, I ran out of there. And I know that the people around me were like, what the hell? I went outside, I went in between buildings and just was crying. I called my uncle, and that was the moment where I was like, I cannot do this anymore. Like, I cannot white knuckle it. It is only going to get worse. I scheduled an appointment with my primary care physician and ended up going on anxiety medications. Again, I had done it in the past after losing my mom and grandmother and aunt in the same year. So there was a lot of grieving and anxiety back in 2019 when that happened. I was familiar with being on it, and I was like, I know that this will help me. I'm gonna do it to get me through law school, taking the bar exam, and getting settled into a new job, and then I can revisit what I need after those big milestones, because it's a lot. And that's something that with law school, they'll say it, but it doesn't really make sense until you're in it, like with what I was dealing with. Like, law school is like this, right? You get accepted into law school, you're at the top of the mountain, but then you got to deal with law school, the exams, the studying, the stress. But then you graduate from law school and you're on top of the mountain, but right behind graduating law school is the bar exam and studying for the bar exam and paying for the bar exam. And then you pass the bar exam, and then you have to start a new job and get adjusted as a working attorney. And for some people, you may not pass the bar exam at the first time, so you retake. It's just mountain and then valley over and over and over, and it's just whiplash of stress at times. But again, I'm not saying this to fearmonger anyone. That is the reality of the situation for a lot of people, even though the way that people handle it, it will obviously differ between people. So some people, they get through it. It's stressful, it's difficult, but they have good coping mechanisms. It's like nature versus nurture, right? Some people just have genetics that make them less susceptible to anxiety or depression or whatever it may be. They also have coping mechanisms that help them. Some people may have them, but those things aren't as strong. They're more susceptible genetically to mental health issues, and they may not have super great coping mechanisms. It doesn't make anyone better or worse than anyone else. It's just the nature of humankind. Everyone's different. And saying this to be honest about my experience, 2L fall was when those symptoms started. I didn't fully address it as I probably should. I should have gone and talked to my doctor about these panic attacks before they got even worse. And I waited until I couldn't handle it on my own anymore. The result of that was one of my goals going into law school was to get on law review because I love reading, researching, and writing. So I knew okay, that would be a really good extracurricular for me because I enjoy that stuff, without any other external factors. But my mental health tanking really, really ruined my ability to enjoy it. And with my law review note, my goal was I wanted to be one of the people who got it published. And that didn't happen because even though to an extent I can't control that my genetics are this way, that genetics are this way. Is that grammatically correct? But I can't help my mental health situation to an extent, but to an extent I can, because I know what I can do to make myself more mentally healthy, emotionally healthy, all those things. And when I was kind of at not rock bottom, but not doing well, it was really hard to do those things that I knew would help me. And I know that people who deal with mental health issues, that is just the vicious cycle that is anxiety and depression. You know what you need to do sometimes, but the thing that you're dealing with makes it harder to do the thing that you need to do. All that to say, I did not publish my note by the time that I had my draft done. It was just not at the standard I would have wanted. I had procrastinated on things. I needed extensions, and it was not the level of work that I was usually holding myself to getting done. And I was like, even if this were to get a yes to being published in our journal, I would be a little embarrassed looking back and reading it because it's not where I wanted it to be. While I'm proud of myself for going and getting the help that I needed, and when I look back, even though I know I didn't reach that goal, it's for all of those reasons. Some of them out of my hands, some of it I could have controlled. It's a learning experience. I have mixed feelings about it. I wish that I could have reached that goal, but that doesn't mean that I'll never get published, right? So that's something that I'm working on now outside of law school, and it's a goal going forward. But I share all that in the hopes that the second you start to shift, the things that you enjoy and love, when you start to disconnect from those, that is a yellow flag. To go to counseling, therapy, your doctor, talk to people, your friends, your mentors. Please, 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 I said this in my first video and I'm going to say it again here, do not suffer in silence. Do not sit in your suffering. Like, try to find ways to improve your situation, and sometimes to do that, you need help, but people can't help you if they don't know that you're struggling. I had one professor say to me, like, when I finally told him I've been dealing with these symptoms for like a long time, but they were starting to get unmanageable in the fall of 2L. When I was in his class, he said to me, and I'll never forget, he was like, I never would have guessed you were going through that. And he couldn't help me until I was breaking down in front of him trying to explain why I didn't hit a deadline, or why my work that I submitted on the deadline sucked. So again, please don't sit in suffering. Don't sit in suffering in silence. That's why I say you're allowed to work out and take breaks and eat healthy, because I feel like there are these, whether it's unconscious or conscious, I feel like there are these external pressures that make it seem like you have to pull all-nighters. You have to eat junk food in the library as you're finishing your brief. No, you don't. It is okay to pay a little bit more for healthy food that you meal prep. It's okay to say no on Sundays for 2 to 3 hours, going out with friends, and instead staying in to meal prep, to fold laundry, to clean, so that way you don't have to worry about it throughout the week. It's okay to study for an hour and then go outside for a walk for 15, 30 minutes to take a break and come back to it. It's okay to do a 3 to 4 hour work sprint and then be done for the day if you got everything you needed to done. It's okay to watch a movie at the end of the day to unwind. Like, we create these irrational rules in our mind that we can't do something or that we shouldn't do something. And at the end of the day, like, that's arbitrary. We just made up that rule. Just please hold on to the things that you enjoy, that you love, your identity outside of being a law student. And that goes for associates in my position and myself. Like, I'm not just an associate. I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm a friend, and that goes for everyone. There are so many people who love you. If you were to allow yourself to get so low that you do something that you can't take back, there would be a lot of heartbroken people. So don't do that. It gets better. I promise it gets better. And like I said in my last video, everything is figure outable. If you're struggling with your mental health, we can fix that. If you're struggling with grades, we can fix that. Everything is figure outable. I'm going to leave it there. That is really the gist of what I share anytime I'm talking to people about 2L year, primarily because of the 2L slump being so prevalent. You're in the thick of it, the middle of it. you're so close to finishing and yet so far. So that's what I would share. And I mean everything that I say. Please take care of yourself. I plan on talking about these subjects more. So give me a follow on my socials at Kimber Marie James if you would like to join me in that conversation, because I would love for it to be a conversation. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I love to be a part of people's communities and network and cheer them on. And have a good day. And again, take care of yourself.